Welcome to the Taken Hour, your sanctuary for sleep. Tonight, we begin a new journey together, a gentle drift into the unknown. If you find peace here, please subscribe to join us for every story. Now, let go of the day. Close your eyes and listen to the rain. It began as a whisper against the window pane, a soft tapping asking for entry. Inside, the room was steeped in the warm amber glow of a single lamp. The air felt heavy, charged with the promise of a summer storm, the kind that wraps a house in a cocoon of sound. She sat in her comfortable armchair, watching the droplets race down the glass, blurring the outside world into indistinct shapes of indigo and gray. It was the perfect night to just be still. The atmosphere thickened, a velvety blanket pressing softly against the walls. She loved these nights when the sky opened up to cleanse the earth. There was a primal comfort in being sheltered, dry, and secure, while nature performed its grand symphony outside. She reached for the old analog recorder on the wooden side table. It was a heavy, metallic brick of a machine, reliable and comforting in its tangibility. The reels were empty, waiting to capture the textured sounds of the arriving tempest. She wanted to bottle the thunder, to keep the soothing rumble for nights when silence felt too loud. The act of preparing the machine was a ritual in itself, a series of small, deliberate movements that slowed her racing mind. Outside, the wind picked up, singing a low, mournful note through the eaves. The trees, indistinct shadows against the dark sky, swayed in a rhythmic dance. She connected the microphone, a delicate silver instrument designed to catch the faintest whispers of the world. Placing it near the window, she cracked the glass just a fraction of an inch. The scent of ozone and damp earth rushed in, cool and invigorating against the warm air of the room. It was the smell of electricity, the scent of a world waiting to be energized. She put on her large, cushioned headphones, instantly muffling the ambient noise of the house and replacing it with the amplified, hyper-real soundscape of the gathering storm. Through the headphones, the rain became a torrent of countless individual impacts. Each drop hitting the sill, the leaves, the roof, was crisp and distinct. It was a mesmerizing tapestry of white noise, a natural sedative that began to untie the knots of tension in her shoulders. She pressed the record button. The tape hissed softly, a bed of static waiting to be filled. The small red light glowed, a steady eye in the dim room. She leaned back, closing her eyes, letting the auditory experience wash over her. There was no need to do anything now but listen, to become a passive receptacle for the night's voice. The anticipation of the first roll of thunder was a pleasant weight in her chest. It started far away, a low growl rolling across the horizon like heavy stones being moved in a distant cavern. The sound vibrated through the floorboards before it fully reached her ears. It was deep, resonant, and utterly grounding. The needle on the recorder's volume meter jumped, dancing to the bass frequency of the sky. She breathed out slowly, matching her exhalation to the fading rumble. This was the connection she sought, the feeling of being a small, safe point in a vast, powerful universe. The storm wasn't frightening. It was a massive, enveloping blanket of energy that made her own small concerns feel insignificant and distant. She felt securely anchored in the present moment. As the storm moved closer, the intervals between the flashes of soft, diffused lightning and the following thunder shortened. The light wasn't harsh. It was a milky, pulsating glow that illuminated the clouds from within, like a giant, sleeping, bioluminescent creature stirring in the upper atmosphere. The subsequent thunder was a long, drawn-out sigh that seemed to go on forever, echoing off the hills and filling the valley. She adjusted the gain on the recorder, ensuring the sound wouldn't peak or distort. She wanted a pure capture, a perfect sonic photograph of this specific electrical event. Her thoughts began to drift, untethered, floating on the waves of sound pouring through her headphones. The rain intensified, becoming a steady, drumming beat that drowned out everything else. It was a wall of sound, thick and impenetrable. In that sonic isolation, her mind became incredibly clear, yet dreamlike. Random thoughts floated by like leaves on a stream. A forgotten melody from childhood, the color of the ocean on a cloudy day, the feeling of soft velvet. She wasn't actively thinking them. They were just arriving and departing, borne on the rhythm of the downpour. The tape spun steadily, collecting it all: the rain, the wind, and the deep, approaching bass of the thunderheads. She felt suspended in time, existing only in the space between the sounds. A particularly long crash of thunder rolled directly overhead. It didn't have the sharp crack of a close strike, but rather the immense, heavy weight of a collapsing mountain of air. It vibrated deep in her chest, a resonant frequency that felt strangely soothing. As the rumble faded into the hiss of the rain, she thought she heard something else, caught in the tail of the sound. It was faint, almost subliminal, buried deep in the texture of the thunder's decay. It sounded like a sigh, but structured, not random noise, but something with a cadence. She opened her eyes, staring at the spinning tape reels, wondering if her tired mind was playing tricks on her. She reached out and stopped the recording. The sudden silence in the headphones, save for the muffled rain outside, was startling. She needed to hear it again. With deliberate movements, she rewound the tape a few minutes. The mechanical whir of the rewinding reels was loud in the quiet room. She pressed play. The heavy thunder crashed again through the headphones. She closed her eyes, focusing all her attention on the fading end of the rumble. There it was again, a subtle modulation within the static, a pattern. It was soft, melodic, almost indistinguishable from the natural sound, but it felt intentional, like a breath caught in the throat of the storm. It was barely there, a ghost of a sound. If she hadn't been listening with such focused intent, she never would have noticed it. It didn't sound mechanical or man-made. It had an organic quality, like wind blowing through a specific formation of rocks, or the very deep resonance of a large creature. But it occurred perfectly within the fade-out of the thunder, as if the electrical discharge itself was speaking. A strange sensation washed over her, not fear, but a profound, quiet curiosity that tingled at the base of her neck. The storm outside seemed suddenly more alive, more present. She decided to keep recording, to see if the anomaly would repeat. She hit record again, the red light winking back into existence. She settled back into the chair, her breathing shallow and quiet. The storm was directly overhead now. The lightning flashes were brighter, illuminating the room in brief, watery pulses of light. The next roll of thunder was immense. As it decayed, she held her breath, straining her ears against the headphones. And there it was, clearer this time, a distinct series of tones hidden in the low-frequency rumble. It wasn't just noise, it had rhythm. It sounded impossibly like a hum, a gentle, vibrating melody murmured by a giant. The sound resonated with something inside her, a feeling of deep, ancestral familiarity. The pattern was mesmerizing. It was a low, oscillating hum that seemed to wrap around her mind. She found herself swaying slightly in her chair, matching the slow rhythm of the sound. It felt safe. It felt enveloping. Her conscious thoughts began to dissolve again, replaced by a singular focus on that woven sound within the storm. Peace, the word floated idly across the surface of her mind. A simple concept, a desire for stillness. The next rumble of thunder came, and within its fading echo, the anomaly shifted. The tones rearranged themselves. They softened, rounded, and seemed to echo back a complex, layered vibration that felt exactly like the word peace translated into pure sound. Her heart gave a slow, heavy thump. Had she imagined it? She tested the waters of her own mind. She thought of the word drift. She visualized a piece of wood floating lazily on a calm river. She held the concept firmly as the next lightning bolt flashed, waiting for the answering thunder. The rumble came, deep and earth-shaking. As it rolled away into the hiss of the rain, the answering modulation returned. It was longer this time, a sliding, downward shift in tones that perfectly encapsulated the feeling of letting go, of slow, aimless movement. It was an acoustic mirror, reflecting her internal state back to her through the medium of the storm. This was impossible. Yet it was happening in her headphones, captured on magnetic tape. The giant cumulonimbus cloud hovering above her house was interacting with her thoughts. The realization should have been terrifying, a fracture in reality. Yet, enveloped in the warm room and the cocoon of sound, she felt only a deep, sedative calm. The connection felt benign, even protective. It was as if the atmosphere itself had become sentient and was gently acknowledging her presence. There was no intrusion, only a soft reflection. She felt incredibly sleepy, a heavy, comforting drowsiness weighting her limbs. The storm was singing her to sleep with her own thoughts. She was drifting now, hovering on the border between wakefulness and dreams. The tape recorder spun on, a faithful witness. Sleep, she thought, a heavy, velvety concept. The thunder rumbled, a massive, gentle giant clearing its throat. The response from the cloud was immediate. It was a rich, multi-layered chord that vibrated deep in her bones. It was the sonic equivalent of a warm blanket being tucked around her, a lullaby humming at the resonant frequency of the earth itself. The sound was thick with comfort, urging her to let go completely. Her eyes felt impossibly heavy. The rain outside softened to a steady, rhythmic hush. The dialogue continued, a slow, hypnotic call and response. She would think a word, a feeling, or just a color, and the cloud would catch it, rolling it through the thunder and sending it back enriched, harmonized, and infinitely more peaceful. She thought of ocean, and the thunder returned the sound of immense, slow waves crashing on a distant shore. She thought of forest, and heard the rustling of 1,000,000 leaves in a deep wind. The boundaries of the room seemed to dissolve. She wasn't just in her chair anymore. She was floating in the center of the storm, held safely in the eye of a benevolent hurricane of sound. There was no fear left, only a profound sense of connection. It felt ancient, this communion with the sky, like something forgotten that her soul suddenly remembered. The voices in the thunder weren't alien. They felt like a part of herself she had never met, echoed back by the universe. The recording tape was nearing its end, the take-up reel almost full. She didn't want to move to change it. To break this trance would be impossibly difficult. The drowsiness was a physical weight, warm and sweet. She let her head tip back against the chair, the headphones slipping slightly, letting in a little of the room's natural quiet to mix with the storm's lullaby. The tape ran out with a soft click. The sudden silence in the headphones was jarring for a moment, leaving her suspended in the quiet room. The rain outside had lessened to a gentle patter. The heart of the storm had passed, moving on to sing to someone else. But the feeling remained, the residual vibration of that massive, gentle presence. She felt thoroughly cleansed, as if her mind had been washed by the same rain that soaked the garden. She was too sleepy to analyze what had happened. The logic of the day held no power here. There was only the profound, heavy comfort of sleep pulling at her. She slowly took off the headphones, placing them on the table next to the silent recorder. The machine held the proof, the capture of the impossible conversation, but that was for tomorrow. Tonight was for the peace the storm had gifted her. She stood up, her body feeling loose and heavy, moving with the languid grace of someone underwater. The air in the room was cool and fresh, still carrying the scent of the rain. She turned off the small lamp, plunging the room into soft darkness, lit only by the faint, diffused moonlight filtering through the dissipating clouds. The house felt safer than it ever had before. She moved to her bedroom, the wooden floor cool beneath her bare feet. Every movement felt slow and deliberate. The sheets were cool and crisp as she slid between them, pulling the heavy duvet up to her chin. The weight was comforting, grounding. Outside, a distant rumble of thunder sounded, a final, faint good night from the departing cloud entity. It was a soft, rolling sound, entirely benign. She closed her eyes, and immediately the patterns of sound returned to her mind's eye, swirling waves of indigo and violet, the visual echo of the thunder's whisper. Her breathing deepened, slowing into the rhythm of deep sleep. In her dreams, she wasn't in the house. She was floating in the upper atmosphere, surrounded by towering pillars of cloud that glowed with an internal light. They weren't cold vapor, they were warm, semi-solid structures of sound and energy. She drifted between them, weightless. The thunder didn't crash here. It hummed around her, a constant, vibrating presence that supported her flight. The voices were clearer now, no longer needing the thunder as a carrier wave. They were a chorus of soft, harmonious tones that communicated pure meaning without the need for clumsy words. They spoke of vast distances, of ancient patience, and of a quiet guardianship over the world below. The dream was lucid and incredibly vivid. She felt the moisture of the clouds against her skin, cool but not chilling. She felt the electrical charge in the air, a pleasant tingle that energized her dream body. The cloud entities were curious about her, probing her mind with gentle waves of sound. They were fascinated by the concept of sleep, something they, as beings of constant energy, did not experience. She shared with them the feeling of stillness, of the mind shutting down, of restoration. In return, they shared the feeling of being spread across the sky, of sensing the magnetic fields of the planet, of existing as pure resonance. It was a perfect exchange of experiences, a communion across species and states of matter. There was no rush, no goal other than this shared moment of understanding in the high upper air. The dream felt eternal, outside of regular time. She floated there, cradled by the sentient storm, learning the language of vibration. She understood now that the recording wasn't just an anomaly, it was an invitation. A doorway had been opened tonight, a frequency established between her small, quiet life and the vast, singing intelligence of the atmosphere. And she knew, with dream certainty, that they would speak again. Morning came gently. The harsh light of day was softened by the remaining overcast sky. She woke slowly, carrying the peace of the dream with her into consciousness. The memory of the thunder's whisper was vivid, not fading like normal dreams. The house was utterly silent. The storm had scrubbed the world clean. She lay in bed, listening to the quiet, feeling a lingering hum in her body, a residual resonance from the night's encounter. It was a comforting feeling, like carrying a secret warmth in her chest. She knew today would be different. Everything looked the same, but the world felt fundamentally altered, deeper and more wondrous. She finally got up and walked into the living room. The tape recorder sat where she had left it, a silent monolith on the table. The reels were still, holding the magnetic imprint of the impossible. She felt a thrill looking at it, a mix of awe and disbelief. Had it really happened? She didn't need to play it back right away to confirm it. The feeling inside her was proof enough. She made tea, the simple, domestic task grounding her. As the steam rose from the cup, she looked out the window at the gray sky. The clouds were high and diffused now, ordinary stratus clouds. But she knew what lay behind them, what vast intelligences slumbered in the potential of the atmosphere. The day passed in a quiet haze. She went through the motions of her routine, but her mind was elsewhere, turned upward toward the sky. She found herself listening more intently to everyday sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the wind in the trees, wondering if other voices were hidden within them, waiting for the right listener to tune in. The world seemed richer, textured with hidden layers of meaning. She felt a new kind of patience, a willingness to wait and listen. The anxiety that usually buzzed beneath the surface of her thoughts was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant calm, like the afterglow of the thunder. As evening approached, she found herself anticipating the night with a new eagerness. The sky remained cloudy, a vast expanse of soft gray that promised nothing but quiet. There was no storm forecast, no electrical energy building up, yet the connection felt dormant, not broken. She returned to her armchair, the scene of the previous night's encounter. The lamp cast the same warm glow. The recorder sat waiting. She didn't turn it on. Tonight, she just wanted to listen with her own ears, to quiet her mind and see if the silence itself had something to say. She closed her eyes and breathed out. The silence of the house was profound. Without the rain, the small sounds were magnified. The ticking clock, the settling timbers. She let her mind expand, filling the quiet space. She thought of the cloud entities sending a silent greeting upward, a mental wave of gratitude for the peace they had shared. She visualized her thought traveling up through the roof, through the cool night air, into the cloud layer. She waited, not anxiously, but with a relaxed openness. There was no thunderous response, no grand sonic gesture. But there was a shift in the room's atmosphere, a subtle change in pressure, a feeling of being noticed. Then she heard it. Not outside, but inside her own mind. A very faint, very low hum. It wasn't auditory, it was telepathic, a direct vibration against her consciousness. It was the same resonant frequency as the thunder whisper, warm and enveloping. It was a simple acknowledgement, a gentle, "We are here." It was a sonic embrace that wrapped around her thoughts, quieting them instantly. The sensation was incredibly soporific. Her body felt heavy and warm, sinking deeper into the cushions of the chair. The boundary between awake and asleep began to blur once more, dissolving into the gentle current of the connection. She didn't fight the pull of sleep. It was a safe tide, carrying her out to a vast, calm sea. The hum in her mind became a drone, a steady anchor in the shifting tides of consciousness. It was the ultimate white noise, intelligent and protective. As her conscious mind let go, the final thought that drifted across the surface was one of profound gratitude. She was not alone. The sky was listening, and it sung her a lullaby of cosmic proportions. She drifted off, knowing that whenever the clouds gathered, a conversation awaited. The night folded around her, thick with peace and silent songs. Morning light filtered through the curtains, a soft, diffused gold that warmed the wooden floorboards. She woke slowly, stretching her limbs into the cool spaces of the sheets. There was no grogginess, no heavy fog of sleep deprivation, only a crisp, clear sense of restoration. The storm had passed days ago, yet the feeling of it lingered in the room like a pleasant perfume. She sat up, the memory of the cloud's mental lullaby still humming faintly at the back of her mind. It wasn't a hallucination. The peace she felt was tangible, a physical weightlessness that made her movements fluid and calm. The day ahead didn't feel like a burden, but a gentle stream she could simply float down. Later that afternoon, the house was filled with the lazy silence of a sunny day. She approached the table where the recorder sat. With a steady hand, she rewound the tape to the beginning. The mechanical whir was the only sound in the room. She pressed play. The hiss of the recorded rain filled the air, cooler and more distant than the real thing. Then the thunder, and within the thunder, that unmistakable, vibrating modulation. Even in the bright light of day, the sound had power. It resonated in her chest, instantly lowering her heart rate. It was a captured frequency of pure tranquility, a sonic artifact that proved the sky had spoken. She spent the next few days in a state of quiet observation. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a vast, empty canvas. She missed the heavy gray blankets of the cumulonimbus, but she understood the cycle now. The clouds were like great migrating whales of the atmosphere. They would return in their own time. She found herself tending to her home with a new mindfulness. Watering the plants felt like a communion with the water cycle. Opening a window felt like inviting the air to breathe with her. She was preparing the vessel, making her space ready for the next arrival. The waiting wasn't anxious. It was a slow, savory anticipation. The weather report finally changed on a Tuesday evening. A low-pressure system was moving in from the coast, a massive swirl of potential energy visible on the satellite maps. To others, it was just rain. To her, it was the return of an old friend. She watched the digital map, tracing the spiral of white clouds with her finger. They looked like a galaxy spinning in slow motion. She felt a phantom tingle in her fingertips, a premonition of the static electricity that would soon fill the air. She brewed a pot of herbal tea, the steam rising in curling ribbons that mimicked the shapes on the screen. It was time to get ready. Preparation became a ritual. She cleared the small wooden table, wiping away dust with a soft cloth. She checked the cables of the microphone, running her fingers along the cool rubber insulation. She selected a fresh reel of tape, the magnetic ribbon dark and pristine, ready to hold new memories. This time, she wanted to try something different. Instead of just listening, she wanted to actively project. If the clouds could mirror her thoughts of peace and drift, what else could they reflect? Could they hold a memory? A melody? She placed a comfortable blanket over the armchair, creating a nest for the night's work. The sky turned a bruised purple as twilight fell. The air grew heavy and still, the classic calm before the storm. The birds fell silent, sensing the shift in pressure. She sat in her chair, the microphone positioned by the open window. The smell was the first arrival, that distinct metallic tang of ozone mixing with the damp scent of soil. It was the perfume of electricity. She put on her headphones, the world narrowing down to the auditory input. A faint, distant rumble rolled across the valley. It was a greeting, a low, bass-heavy wave that seemed to say, "We are returning." She smiled, closing her eyes, and pressed record. The first drops were large and heavy, slapping against the pavement like slow applause. Through the headphones, they sounded like small explosions of water. She focused her mind. She didn't use words this time. Instead, she visualized a color, a deep, warm amber, like honey or old varnish. She held the image in her mind, imagining it glowing in the center of her chest. She pushed this feeling of warmth outward, toward the open window, toward the looming dark. The thunder cracked, closer now, and as the sound decayed, the feedback came. A warm, golden hum vibrated through the headphones, a sonic translation of the color amber. It was a synesthetic miracle. The cloud entity had caught her projection of color and turned it into sound. The hum was rich and syrupy, wrapping her in a feeling of ancient comfort. Encouraged, she tried a texture. She thought of velvet, smooth, soft, dragging against the skin. She projected the sensation of touch. The storm responded with a susurrating hiss, a white noise that felt incredibly soft to the ears, lacking any sharp edges or high frequencies. It was a brushed sound, gentle and tactile. The interaction was becoming more complex, a language of pure sensory experience being traded between a human and the atmosphere. The rain intensified, becoming a steady, rhythmic wash. The connection was strong tonight. She felt a sense of playfulness from the sky, a curiosity about her human experiences. She decided to share a simple memory: the feeling of walking into a warm library on a cold day. The smell of paper, the hush, the safety. She built the memory in her mind, brick by brick. The thunder rumbled, a long rolling sound that lasted for seconds. Within it, she heard the sound of turning pages, the creak of wood, a multitude of tiny, comforting sounds layered into a symphony of safety. The cloud understood the concept of sanctuary. She was drifting deeper into the trance. The boundary between the room and the storm was gone. She felt as though she were floating inside the cloud itself, suspended in the cool, charged mist. The entities were all around her, vast intelligences made of vapor and voltage. They didn't have faces or bodies, just presence. They showed her their view of the world, a vast, curving horizon, the glittering web of cities below, the slow, majestic rotation of the planet. It was a perspective of immense detachment and peace. Her small worries dissolved completely against the scale of the globe. The perspective shift was profound. She felt the interconnectedness of all weather, how a breeze in one hemisphere fed a storm in another. It was a giant, breathing system, and for a moment, she was part of its nervous system. The recorder taped on, capturing the low-frequency hums that accompanied these visions. She wondered what a stranger would hear if they played the tape. Would they just hear storm noise? Or would they feel this sudden expansion of the soul? The thunder purred, a massive cat made of clouds, content and resting. The vibration massaged her tense muscles, loosening the last knots of the day. She decided to offer a melody. She hummed a simple, slow tune, a lullaby from her childhood. It was barely a whisper in the room, but the microphone picked it up. She felt the entities listening, their vast attention focusing on the tiny, fragile thread of human song. They didn't mimic it exactly. Instead, they harmonized. The wind outside changed pitch, whistling through the eaves in a perfect third above her note. The distant rumble of thunder provided the bass. For a minute, she sang a duet with the weather, a haunting, beautiful composition created in the moment, never to be repeated. The song ended, fading into the steady drum of the rain. A profound silence followed, not an absence of sound, but a fullness of it. The air in the room felt charged, thick with invisible ions. She felt sleepy, a heavy, irresistible pull toward unconsciousness. The cloud entities seemed to sense this. The sounds in the headphones shifted, becoming rhythmic and repetitive, like a slow heartbeat. Thump, hiss, thump, hiss. It was a biological rhythm mimicked by the elements, designed to synchronize her own heart, to slow it down to the pace of deep sleep. She slid the headphones off, letting them rest around her neck. The sound of the real rain was softer now, muffled by the walls. The connection remained, a tether of awareness stretching up into the sky. She felt protected, watched over by the benevolent giants of the air. She stood up, her legs feeling heavy and warm. She moved towards the bedroom, leaving the recorder running. She wanted to capture the entire night, the full arc of the storm's lullaby. The red light of the machine was the only star in the dark living room, a silent sentinel witnessing the communion. In her bedroom, the atmosphere was cool and still. She crawled into bed, the linens feeling like cool water against her skin. She curled up, pulling the heavy duvet over her shoulder. Outside, the thunder gave a soft, final rumble, a sound of settling in. She closed her eyes and immediately saw the colors again, soft indigos and violets swirling behind her eyelids. The storm was singing her to sleep, not with words, but with pure resonance. She felt her consciousness unspooling, relaxing, spreading out to fill the room, then the house, then the sky. Dreams that night were liquid and vast. She was rain, falling through the dark air, cooling the pavement, feeding the roots of trees. She was the wind, sweeping over oceans and mountains, unrestrained and free. There was no narrative, only existence. She felt the joy of release, the simple purpose of gravity and flow. It was the deepest sleep she had achieved in years, a hibernation of the soul. The cloud entities held her in this state, suspending her in their slow time, where hours passed like seconds. She was recharging, drawing energy directly from the storm. She woke before the alarm, pulled from the depths by the brightening sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world scoured and shining. The window was open a crack, and the air that drifted in was incredibly sweet. She lay there for a long time, just feeling the sensation of being fully rested. Her mind was quiet, the usual morning rush of thoughts absent. In its place was a steady, calm hum, the residual signature of the night's connection. She felt heavier, more solid, yet lighter in spirit. The storm had taken her stress and washed it away into the gutters. She went to the living room to check the recorder. The tape had run out hours ago. It sat there, a spool of brown ribbon holding the secrets of the night. She labeled it simply Duet. She placed it on a shelf next to the first tape. A library was forming, a collection of conversations with the unknown. She didn't feel the need to listen to it immediately. Knowing it was there was enough. It was a battery of calm she could tap into whenever she needed. She ran her hand over the machine, a silent thank you to the technology that bridged the gap. The days that followed were characterized by a new sense of perception. She noticed how the wind moved through the city, how it funneled down streets and eddied around corners. She saw the invisible currents of air that everyone else ignored. She realized that the conversation wasn't just for stormy nights. The atmosphere was always there, always touching her. She began to practice sending feelings, even on clear days. A thought of gratitude directed at a passing cumulus puff. A wish for peace sent into the blue zenith. She felt a subtle echo back, a faint shimmer in the air that confirmed she was heard. One evening, she sat on her porch as the sun set. The sky was a riot of oranges and pinks. She had her small portable recorder this time. She wanted to capture the transition, the moment day turned to night. As the colors faded into the deep blue of twilight, she heard it. Not a rumble, but a high, thin whistle in the wind. It was a different tone, lighter, almost playful. It was the voice of the high-altitude winds, the jet stream singing far above. It was a reminder that the sky had many voices, many moods. She smiled, letting the recorder run, catching the song of the twilight. She began to understand that her role was not just a listener, but an anchor. The cloud entities, so vast and diffuse, enjoyed the focus of a single human mind. It grounded them, gave them a point of contact with the solid earth. In return, they gave her the gift of their perspective, limitless and free. It was a symbiosis. She spent her evenings reading about meteorology, learning the scientific names for her friends: altocumulus, stratosphere, ionosphere. But the science was just a map. The territory was the feeling in her chest when the pressure dropped. The next significant encounter happened during a dry thunderstorm, lightning without rain. The sky was a frantic strobe light, silent and eerie. She felt a tension in the air, a restless energy. She set up the recorder, but this time she projected a feeling of calm. She visualized a flat, still lake. She pushed the image hard against the frantic crackle of the static. Slowly, remarkably, the lightning began to synchronize. The erratic flashes found a rhythm, a slow, pulsing beat that matched her breathing. The thunder, when it finally came, was a soft, purring roll. She had soothed the storm. This realization, that the influence went both ways, was empowering. She wasn't just a passive observer. She was a participant in the weather of her own life. If she could calm a storm, she could certainly calm her own mind. The anxiety that used to plague her seemed distant now, a relic of a time before she knew the sky was alive. She slept better, deeper, her dreams filled with flying and floating. She walked through her days with a secret smile, carrying the vastness of the horizon within her. The world felt bigger, yet more intimate. She started recording the silence of the house when the storms were gone. She found that even the silence had texture. There was a waiting silence, a resting silence, and a listening silence. On playback, she could hear the difference. In the listening silence, the tape hiss seemed to organize itself into faint, harmonious patterns, as if the air in the room was humming along with the machine. It was a subtle reminder that the connection remained, even when the sky was clear. The entities were always there, just a frequency shift away. One night, a dense fog rolled in, blanketing the valley in white. Fog was just a cloud touching the ground. She opened the window wide, letting the cool, damp vapor drift into the living room. It curled around the furniture like a living thing. She didn't need the recorder. She just sat in the chair, letting the fog touch her face. It felt like a cold, gentle hand. The communication was immediate and intimate. Stillness, the fog whispered into her mind. Rest. The world outside had vanished, erased by the white. There was only this room and the cloud that had come to visit. She closed her eyes, breathing in the mist. It tasted of pure water and high places. She felt weightless, as if the chair was floating in a white void. The fog dampened all sound. The silence was absolute and cotton thick. In that isolation, her mind expanded. She thought of the people sleeping in the valley below, wrapped in the same blanket. She sent a thought of sweet dreams out into the whiteness, imagining it rippling through the fog like a wave. She felt the fog amplify it, carrying her wish to thousands of sleeping minds. The fog lifted by morning, leaving every leaf and blade of grass decorated with tiny diamonds of dew. She collected a few drops in a small glass vial. It felt like holy water, a physical remnant of the visitation. She placed the vial next to the tapes. Her collection was growing. Sounds, memories, and now the essence of the cloud itself. She felt like a curator of a very private museum, a keeper of the bond between earth and sky. It gave her life a quiet, sacred purpose. She decided to create a dedicated space for listening. She moved the comfortable armchair to the corner of the room with the best acoustics. She added a soft rug, some lush ferns, and dimmable lighting. This was her cockpit, her control tower. Here, she would travel without moving. She tested the setup that evening, playing back the duet tape. The sound was immersive, filling the corner with the rich, textured rumble of the storm. She closed her eyes and was instantly transported back to that night, feeling the same deep relaxation wash over her. As she lay in bed that night, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for her life. It was a simple life, quiet and solitary, but it was rich with magic. She didn't need to travel to the stars. The stars, or the clouds that hid them, came to her. She felt the familiar, heavy warmth of sleep pulling at her limbs. She visualized her consciousness as a small boat, untying from the dock and drifting out onto a calm, dark lake. The water was still, reflecting the sky. She was safe. She was held. She drifted into sleep with a smile, the phantom sound of thunder acting as her lullaby. Somewhere above, in the cold, thin air of the troposphere, the clouds were gathering again, knitting themselves together with wind and water. They were preparing the next song, the next conversation. But for now, silence was enough. The connection held, a silent, invisible thread linking the sleeper in the bed to the watchers in the sky. And in that connection, there was perfect, unbroken peace. The season began to turn, painting the world in shades of russet and gold. The air grew crisp, carrying the scent of dry leaves and wood smoke. With the change in temperature came a change in the atmosphere's voice. The heavy, booming thunder of summer retreated, replaced by the swift, rushing currents of autumn winds. She sat by her window, watching the trees sway in a mesmerizing dance. The clouds were different now, higher, faster, sweeping across the sky like brushstrokes of white paint on a hard blue canvas. They felt lighter, carrying a message of transition and release. She set up her recorder to capture the wind. It was a more subtle sound than thunder, a complex layering of whistles, rustles, and sighs. She placed the microphone near the chimney, where the draft created a low, hollow, flute-like tone. As she listened through the headphones, she projected the thought of change. She visualized a leaf detaching from a branch and floating gently to the earth. The wind responded instantly. The pitch dropped, becoming a soothing, mournful hum that mimicked the exact trajectory of a falling leaf, a slow, spiraling descent into rest. The dialogue had evolved. It was no longer just about emotions. It was about the rhythms of the earth. The cloud entities were teaching her how to let go. Just as the trees released their leaves to conserve energy for the winter, she learned to release her jagged thoughts, her worries, her need for control. She spent hours just sitting in the chair, practicing this internal shedding. With every exhale, she let a thought fall away. The wind outside sang a song of unburdening, a lullaby for the busy mind, urging it to strip down to its quiet, essential core. One evening, a vast blanket of gray stratus clouds settled over the valley, bringing a steady, cold drizzle. It wasn't a storm, just a heavy, damp presence. She turned on the recorder, seeking the comfort of the white noise. The sound was thick and muffled, like the world was being wrapped in wet wool. Through the static, a new voice emerged, deeper, slower, more resonant than before. It was the voice of the coming winter. It spoke of hibernation, of deep, dark sleep under the earth. It was a heavy, sedative vibration that made her eyelids flutter. She surrendered to the heaviness. The concept of hibernation was incredibly appealing. To simply shut down, to rest, to wait for the warmth to return. The cloud entities seemed to be tucking the world in. She imagined the roots of the trees sleeping, the seeds waiting in the soil. She felt a kinship with them. Her breathing slowed to a crawl, matching the slow, steady drip of the rain. The tape recorder spun silently, capturing the sound of the earth falling asleep. She felt safe, held in the dark, cool palm of the season. The first frost arrived on a Tuesday, transforming the garden into a crystalline sculpture park. Every blade of grass was rimmed with white sugar. The air was impeccably still. Silence was the dominant frequency. She didn't record, she just listened to the quiet. It was a brittle silence, sharp and clean. She sent a thought of clarity up into the pale, freezing sky. The response was a sudden, perfect stillness in the air, a cessation of all movement, as if time itself had frozen along with the dew. It was a moment of absolute, perfect peace. She realized her archive of tapes was a library of sleep. She had captured the thunder of summer, the winds of autumn, and now the silence of winter. She spent an evening organizing them, labeling the cases with dates and feelings. August thunder, joy. October wind, release. November rain, deep rest. It was a pharmacy of sound. Whenever she needed a specific kind of peace, she could just reach out and load a reel. But increasingly, she found she didn't need the machines. The sounds were imprinted on her memory, accessible with a simple thought. The weather forecast predicted the first major snowstorm of the year, a white giant moving down from the north. She felt a thrill of anticipation, but it was a quiet, deep excitement. This would be the ultimate blanket. She prepared the house, checking the heating, piling extra blankets on the bed, stocking the pantry. It was a nesting instinct. As the sky turned a solid, featureless white, she felt the atmosphere pressing down, not with weight, but with a soft, muting cushion. The world was about to be hushed. The snow began at dusk. Huge, heavy flakes that fell straight down in the windless air. She sat by the window, the recorder running. Snow had a sound. It was a soft hiss-tick, a microscopic collision of ice crystals. It was the quietest sound she had ever recorded. Through the headphones, it sounded like the static of the universe, the background radiation of peace. She closed her eyes and visualized the house being buried, covered in a soft, protective drift. She was in a capsule, separated from the world, floating in white. The connection with the entities was different tonight. It wasn't a conversation, it was a merger. The cloud was no longer above her, it was all around her, touching the ground in the form of snow. She felt the vast, cold intelligence of the storm settling over the roof. Silence, it seemed to say. Sleep, rest. The words weren't heard, they were felt. Heavy weights placed gently on her shoulders, pushing her down into the cushions. The visual world outside was gone, replaced by a swirling white void. She stayed in the chair for hours, mesmerized by the falling snow. The tape ran out, but she didn't change it. The silence was too perfect to interrupt with mechanical clicks. She drifted in and out of a light doze, her dreams filled with vast white plains and slow-moving glaciers. The cold outside made the warmth inside feel luxurious. She was a small ember in a world of ice, burning quietly and steadily. The storm was a guardian, keeping the noise and chaos of the world at bay. By midnight, the snow was deep. The world was transformed into a soft, undulating landscape of white curves. She finally moved to her bedroom. The silence in the house was absolute. No traffic, no wind, no animals. Just the heavy, muffled quiet of the snowpack. She climbed into bed, pulling the duvet up to her chin. She felt incredibly heavy, as if gravity had increased just for her, pulling her down into the mattress. She was sinking into sleep, a stone dropping into a deep, soft pond. In the morning, the sun broke through. The world was blindingly bright, a diamond ocean. She walked out onto the porch, the cold air stinging her cheeks in a pleasant way. She felt renewed, scrubbed clean by the winter storm. She looked up at the sky, now a piercing blue. "Thank you," she whispered. A sudden breeze shook a branch, dumping a small pile of snow with a soft whump. It was a playful acknowledgement. The conversation continued, even in the sunlight. Weeks passed. The winter deepened. She spent her evenings listening to her tapes, mixing the sounds in her head. She would play the summer thunder over the winter silence, creating impossible soundscapes. She realized she had become a conductor of the elements. She could summon the feeling of rain, even when the sky was clear. The anxiety that had once defined her life was a distant memory, a story about a stranger. She was anchored now, rooted in the deep rhythms of the planet. She decided to retire the recorder. It had served its purpose. It had built the bridge, but the bridge was now solid enough to walk on without assistance. She placed the machine on the highest shelf, next to the row of tapes. It looked like a relic, a beautiful piece of history. She patted its metal case affectionately. Tonight, she would listen with only her mind. She sat in the chair, closed her eyes, and reached out. Immediately, she felt the hum, the constant, low-frequency vibration of the atmosphere. The connection was stronger without the technology. It was direct, telepathic, and pure. She could feel the weather patterns forming hundreds of miles away. She could sense the high-pressure ridge building over the ocean. She was part of the global system. It wasn't overwhelming. It was comforting. It was the feeling of belonging to something massive and eternal. She was never alone. The sky was always there, a ceiling of thought and energy covering the world. One quiet evening, she felt a familiar presence. The specific cloud entity from that first stormy night, the one that had whispered, "Peace," was returning. She felt its unique signature, a warm, rolling bass note in her mind. She went to the window. The sky was filling with dark, heavy clouds again. A winter thaw was bringing rain. She smiled. It was like an old friend coming for tea. She didn't prepare the microphone. She just opened the window a crack and waited. The rain began, cold and steady. The thunder rolled, deep and long. And there it was, the voice, clearer than ever, vibrating in the air around her. We are here. It resonated in her chest, in her bones. She sent back a feeling of welcome. The thunder answered with a gentle major key rumble. She sat in the dark, bathed in the sound, letting the conversation wash over her. It was a dialogue of pure being, of two existences acknowledging each other across the barrier of species and state. She fell asleep in the chair that night, lulled by the storm. She dreamed she was a cloud, drifting over the sleeping world, watching over the houses, the forests, the oceans. She felt the sunlight on her vaporous back and the cool earth below. She felt the joy of raining, of giving herself back to the ground. When she woke, she wasn't sure if she was the woman dreaming of the cloud or the cloud dreaming of the woman. The distinction didn't seem to matter. Spring approached slowly. The snow melted, feeding the creeks. The cycle continued. She watched the green shoots push through the mud. She felt the earth waking up, stretching. Her own energy rose with it. She felt vibrant, alive, connected. She kept her nightly appointments with the sky, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. It was her meditation, her prayer, her grounding. The whisper from the cloud wasn't a secret anymore. It was her reality. She realized she had changed. She moved slower now, with more grace. She spoke less, but her words had more weight. People noticed it, a calmness that radiated from her. They would sit near her and feel relaxed without knowing why. She was becoming a conduit, a ground wire for the peace of the sky. She carried the stillness of the snow and the rhythm of the rain in her aura. She was walking proof that we are not separate from the world around us. The final storm of the season arrived on a warm evening. It was a gentle thunderstorm, full of soft lightning and warm rain. She lay in her bed, the window wide open. The curtains billowed in the breeze, ghost-like and graceful. She didn't need to focus to hear the voices anymore. They were a constant, comforting background hum. Sleep, the thunder whispered. Drift. Dream. She closed her eyes, letting the darkness take her. She floated on the sounds. The rain was 1,000 tiny fingers massaging her mind. The thunder was a rocking cradle. She felt herself dissolving, expanding, becoming mist. There was no fear, only a sense of returning home. She understood now that she had always been part of this song. The recording, the machine, the fear, they were just steps on the path to this ultimate realization. She was the sky, and the sky was her. The tape library remained on the shelf, a testament to the journey. Maybe one day someone else would find them, play them, and hear the impossible whisper. Maybe they would start their own conversation. But for her, the need for proof was gone. She had the experience. She had the connection. She had the peace. It was locked inside her heart, a permanent storm of tranquility that no one could take away. The rain slowed to a stop. The clouds parted, revealing a moon bright enough to cast shadows on the floor. The storm moved on, carrying its lullaby to the next valley, the next sleeper. But the silence it left behind was rich and full. She lay in the quiet, her breathing deep and even. She was fully asleep now, wandering the vast, beautiful landscapes of her dreams, hand in hand with the entities of the air. Her dreams were lucid and bright. She flew through canyons of clouds, swam in rivers of lightning, rested on pillows of fog. She learned the history of the wind, the memory of the water. It was an education in eternity. She knew that when she woke, she would bring a piece of this vastness back with her. She would wake up smiling, ready for the simple joy of a cup of tea and the morning sun. The night wore on. The earth turned. The stars wheeled overhead. Inside the small house, the woman slept the sleep of the just, the sleep of the loved. She was a small point of peace on a spinning world, a beacon of calm. The house settled, the timbers creaking gently. It was a safe harbor. And above, the sky watched, a silent, benevolent guardian, keeping its promise to watch over her. And so, the story of the whisper finds its resting place, not in an ending, but in a state of being. The tapes are there. The recorder is silent, and the woman is at peace. The storm will return, as it always does, and the conversation will continue, endless and eternal. But for now, the air is still. The night is quiet. The world is asleep. Let yourself drift now, just as she did. Feel the heaviness in your own limbs, the comfort of your own bed. Imagine the sky above you, vast and protective. Imagine the clouds whispering a soft good night just for you. Let the worries of the day dissolve into the atmosphere, carried away by the wind. You are safe. You are held. You are part of the great, slow rhythm of the earth. Good night, traveler. Good night, dreamer. May your sleep be deep, your dreams be sweet, and your waking be gentle. The storm has passed. The silence is here. Rest now. Sleep.